Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brett Ebedes. I'm filling in for Peter Warren, who's been your moderator and MC so far, as he's presenting in today's second session. Thank you very much for joining us for day 3 of InvestTech. I think the last couple of days have been really exciting, and no doubt today will be absolutely no different. Just before we start, I'd just like to go through a couple of things with you. The first thing I'd like to mention is our sponsors and our presenters. Big thank you to them, because without them, these types of events wouldn't be possible, so I really appreciate your support. We love sessions to be as interactive as possible. Zoom's really good with the Q&A feature, so please don't hesitate to ask any questions that come to mind. We'd certainly love to get through as many of those as we can, covering both sessions later on. Just a reminder, these sessions are accredited for CPD points, so please stay right through the end so we can get those CPD points to you. I think you also get a lot out of both sessions as well. There's no shortage of great content with IMAP, and next week we've got Investing in Disruption, 3 really interesting topics. If you haven't registered for those, I certainly encourage you to do so. I certainly plan to get to quite a few of them, so please have a look at those if you haven't already. And finally, to kick off today, our second session, as I mentioned, will be by Peter Warren, and I'll introduce him in about half an hour's time. He'll be talking about advice platforms versus ecosystems. But closely aligned to that is integrating managed accounts into advice software. And we've got Lanie Worsley, who's a senior consultant with Morningstar, as well as Rick Cristoforo, who's the director of research products. Morningstar really cover the full gamut of solutions for this space, and also acquired advisor logic. So really have a very interesting depth of capability. And I'm now going to hand over to the team from Morningstar to share their session with you. Thank you for attending so far, everyone.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on the managed accounts, the use of managed accounts within financial planning software. Before I hand over to Lanie to talk to the software itself and how Morningstar is looking at delivery of advice within the context of managed accounts, I thought I'd do a bit of context or give a bit of positioning and context as to how Morningstar looks at the environment. Our mission ultimately is to empower investors to make wise financial decisions, and aligned with that, of course, is to support financial advisors in doing so, using our expertise and our global brand. Some components that form part of that in terms of the way we deliver our offering to market is foundation by high quality data, our independent research approach, which is unique in terms of its business model, software and components, the investment consulting side, and of course, managed accounts and managed portfolios. When I think about managed accounts, if we go to the next slide, Lanie, the interesting situation that we've had is managed accounts can often be seen as a 20-year overnight success. The overall FUM is now well over $100 billion now, as at 14th of September, 111 billion. And what's even more interesting is the usage. It's no longer a access point for investors that are a specialist. The usage is nearing 50% of the overall advisors in the marketplace. And that's created some huge opportunities for the managed account marketplace and advisors attached to that, but at the same time created some additional challenges or challenges to think about. Multi-sectors, for example, have gone through an interesting experience in the last 20 odd years, where they were the mainstay of investment management or investment advice, and they dropped off, and now they're coming back, and largely driven by managed account use. And this is through the managed account offerings proliferating APLs. Now, that gives advisors a lot of choice. In fact, in a lot of cases, overwhelming choice. In addition to that, the question around how to implement these offerings within an advice context and in advice business context with efficiency and scale. Because whilst the businesses themselves of the managed account are acquiring assets at scale, the next level down at advice needs to consider how those individual portfolios are being delivered to a client. And in addition to that, the question around insourcing versus outsourcing managed account portfolios. There's been a proliferation of insourcing within AFSLs, but of course, there's now been an uplift with third-party offerings within managed accounts. If we just pop to the next slide. So as an advice operator, there are some key questions that come up when we're thinking about managed accounts advice and how it is delivered within financial planning software. And we've just put 6 down. I'm sure there's more. The first one, of course, is I guess the easy one to think about is how to choose. As a professional, there's a great choice to make. And because of the proliferation and the $111 billion, it's how do you differentiate, select and blend managed accounts into portfolios, or how do you select a portfolio to do the whole job? One that's commonly talked about is the headline SMA versus the underlying portfolio. It's often the case that technology will deliver one or the other. And whilst clients will generally be comfortable with the idea of the headline SMA manager, it's on the advisor to essentially be able to give both the headline in terms of an overall portfolio sleeve, as well as the underlying portfolio assets. And then also, in a lot of cases, to consider clients who've got unadvised or non-managed account holdings within the context of the overall portfolio. How to think about investor preferences, given the advent and the uplift in the usage of ESG, thinking about exclusions and large holdings, and again, thinking about that separation of portfolio assets with the overall client assets. As time goes on, once the portfolio is implemented, then there's a question around how does the strategic asset allocation play into a manager who may be operating with tactical asset allocation, as is many of the cases with managed accounts, and how does that then work in over time during the advice review process? Because of course, in a tactical asset allocation case with managed account market movements, that will then progressively move the client away from their advice strategic asset allocation. There are situations where managed account providers might provide fees at different levels for different operators, how to differentiate those and how to look at it from a per platform, per account basis. And then finally, and possibly most importantly, is the front face. How does an advisor prove best interest duty and comply with the FASEA standards? And I've named 5 and 6 specifically, which is the understanding of the advice and the understanding of the overall outcomes of the advice. So thinking about that context and going, okay, well, how do we support those in the context of delivering managed account advice? Lanie, next slide, please. When we consider financial advice and the offering overall, we think about it in 4 different areas. Know your client and understanding, what that means in terms of technologies, things such as CRM, client portal, risk profiling, and behavioral finance. Knowing your business, very important in terms of, as we are now in a situation where, individual businesses are now consolidating to become much larger corporate entities, having more of a look through as to how the business is being written. Knowing your product, research, investment data, analysis. And I guess, in a lot of cases, that's what Morningstar is well known for in terms of our long-term history. And then knowing obligations, how to prove and support the advice that's being delivered. And getting all those pieces right delivers a client's best interest outcome and a FASEA standard compliance. Next slide. And before I hand over to Lanie, this is essentially our offering into marketplace. So we have 6 core offerings that sit across. As Brett mentioned, Advisor Logic sitting middle bottom is our financial advice software. We have advice, AFSL dashboards and the ability to do the communication remuneration payments. Morningstar Direct allows the advice businesses to build portfolios and think about actually constructing them from a ground up perspective. The manager selection team supports AFSLs in terms of how to build a managed account. That's all foundationed on our independent research and the underlying data, of course, Advisor Logic, and then risk profiling, linking the client's objectives and client's needs with their overall risk tolerance. So with that, I've basically laid a context on the table and a series of challenges, and I'll hand over to Lanie now to talk to how they might be dealt with.
Thanks, Rick, and good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. So when we're thinking about integrating managed accounts into advice software, what are we thinking and what does that mean? I think, depending on the advisor that you talk to, you can get different responses on this. Now, Rick highlighted a few of the key challenges that we're hearing from advisors and also the accelerated use of managed accounts that we're seeing within the industry. Overall, I think we need to look at the advisor end-to-end requirements, and we need to be able to deliver robust, flexible, and efficient solutions that enable advisors to adapt and respond to their client needs. Now, from a technology standpoint, we often see parts of the workflow that are addressed really well, but it can still leave frustration for the advice business in terms of how they manage the rest of their processes. As a former advisor myself, I can understand these challenges in terms of managing the end-to-end business. The compliance and admin alone can be really overwhelming, and ultimately advisors just want to get on with looking after their clients, making a positive impact now and in the future. So today I'm going to explore how Morningstar currently solves some of these challenges, specifically related to managed accounts, the advisor workflow, and our financial planning solution, Advisor Logic. I'll also touch on some of the initiatives and areas that we're looking at covering in 2022. So first up, with Advisor Logic and looking at the advice process, we know at first and foremost, the advisors need to be able to engage and interact with their clients to capture the client information. FactFind and CRM is essential, being a singular data entry point, an integration point for creating new clients and also updating existing client records. In Advisor Logic, we have the ability to then transfer this information throughout the system for greater efficiency, and also ensuring quality and consistency of client information. Now, this is also backed by an extensive range of product provider data feeds, including managed accounts, and certainly there is some more work to do in this area, in particular around data feeds. Overarching this, we've got full electronic office capabilities to ensure AFSLs and practices can manage their compliance, capture their full client position, interactions, and extensive reporting capabilities. Next, looking at our advice flow. So we've got analyze and develop. Advisors need tools to assess their client position and develop strategies that align to their client's best interest. Now, we have cash flow modeling, but additionally, this is coupled with integrated Morningstar analysis and product comparison, which I will dive into further shortly. And this supports advisors being able to clearly articulate the value of their advice. Next, we've got advice delivery. Now, when it comes to generating advice, a significant pain point still remains for advisors in producing SOAs and the length of time this is actually taking to do so. Our digital advice module addresses this challenge. And then further, we need to consider ongoing practice and client management. Advisors need efficient and transparent reporting throughout the flow, and also the mechanisms in place to track and manage their overall requirements. So now let's dive into a few of the specifics relating to managed accounts in particular, and also the advisor workflow. So to start with, we know that, either a new client or an existing client, an advisor needs to be able to manage portfolios overall for their client base. To support this, we've seamlessly integrated Morningstar data and research into Advisor Logic to provide flexibility and the transparency to easily view the client portfolios. Now, on screen, we've got an example here of our FactFind assets area. And this is where you can use various filters to be able to view a client's portfolio at ownership, platform, direct investment, or managed account level. You also have the opportunity to be able to drill down at a granular level to see the underlying holdings. This provides the quick access and also insights. So advisors can then see if a client has large holdings in common stock, various stock segments, or misalignment to client preferences. For example, ESG. Also leveraging Morningstar Advisor Research Centre, we've included our market-leading X-ray and compare tools within the system for quick analysis of existing portfolios, proposed changes through the X-ray tool, for example, benchmarking capability, and comparison against target models. A few examples are the snapshots on these slides here. Now, we haven't stopped with our research integration there. This is also extended at a platform level in our in-house superannuation and platform data sets. This further supports the comprehensive product research to enable, as you can see on the screen, we've got super, non-super, also insurance, but we can then see details around features and benefits, underlying fees, and further detail. We also have the ability to be able to see data-fed SMA portfolios and also input bespoke fee arrangements and preset advisor models for advisors that want to create their own model portfolios as well. So overall, the combined layers of research integrated into the system give advisors the tools that enable them to deliver quality advice in the best interest of their clients. Now for 2022, this is set to continue, and we will really look to enhance a number of areas. Now, two areas worth noting is, one is extending on the investment selection and substitution of holding capability. The second, which is particularly relevant for the audience on the call, in that we want to look at or partner with providers in terms of straight-through processing or execution of recommendations into the platform. Next up, we need to look at, so if we look at our advice flow and our scenario, let's imagine our advisor has analysed the client's position, but then undertaken research on suitable recommendations. But how do we then see the alignment to their strategic asset allocation? This can be achieved in a number of ways. First off, by the X-ray tool that I highlighted before, and portfolio tools we have within the system. Another is via our digital advice module. Here, as you can see on screen, we can review and alter our recommendations in line with our clients' preferences. Again, with flexibility of viewing managed accounts at a group or granular level. So if we are wanting to swap it out, for example, a singular holding, we can easily do that through this flow. As we make each adjustment, the respective asset allocation is also then demonstrated on screen to ensure that we're aligning to the strategic target. Now, we know as part of all this work, managed account providers often adopt a tactical asset allocation to take advantage of market conditions. This is also reflected in our portfolio feeds into AdvisorLogic. So any variance of tactical versus strategic can easily be seen and addressed in the advice. Now, looking at advice delivery a little bit more broadly, let's imagine we've gone through our steps and the advisor is now ready to implement or formulate their recommendations. We know an absolutely critical requirement of financial planning software is to produce advice. Now here at Morningstar, we see advice reimagined. With our digital advice module providing an intuitive guided process that streamlines the entire workflow of advice generation. You can easily select the required strategies. You link these back to the client goals and objectives for best interest to then make suitable recommendations for your client. As part of this, embedded within this flow, we've also got our research capabilities. So before I touched on our standalone advice tools in terms of our platform and our independent research, but we've also embedded this into the digital advice flow. So the advisor has the opportunity to go straight to digital advice and encompass all the recommendations and research within the one flow. Additionally, we've added in a dynamic SOA. So what that means is, as we walk through the flow of each advice element, our SOA is actually being built, and we have the opportunity to edit and modify as we go. Now, in terms of output, so complementing the SOA and ROA, you also have immediate access to Morningstar research, product provider PDS, and TMD documents to support the recommendations. Now, overall, over the last 12 months, Morningstar has invested heavily in advice delivery and compliance. We believe this provides advisors with critical yet efficient tools to accelerate advice generation with the aim to reduce the cost to serve. As a flow-on effect, we would really like to see more Australians have access to affordable financial advice. Again, 2022 is going to be no different, and we've got some really great things coming up. Extending on our 70+ strategies that are already within digital advice, enhancing our product and research capabilities, as I've noted, enhancing output documentation, and also the advisor-client capability. And so this kind of brings us to the end of the advice flow, where our recommendations are in place. We now want to review and monitor our client's position. Now, Advisor Logic offers everything you would really expect in terms of workflow management, compliance, fee disclosure, quick insights through desktop widgets. We've uplifted our portfolio reporting capability, and there's still a lot of work that we need to do there. So advisors then have a clear view of their client's position at any point in time. Again, 2022, we're further leveraging Morningstar data and portfolio analytics with client data that's sitting in Advisor Logic. Now, this will ensure further transparency and allow actionable insights across a number of areas, such as research rating changes, for one, portfolio risk relative to the client's risk profile, and portfolio weighting and rebalance. And another important area that's often overlooked is the advisor-client engagement. Now, as I touched on, and I think Rick did, we know admin and compliance is a heavy burden in the advice industry and for advisors. So how do advisors and clients interact effectively whilst also ticking the must-have boxes? This is where we believe our new Client Wealth Portal comes in. We've built this on global Morningstar technology, and the first release is going to provide insightful portfolio reporting and doc sharing capability. Early next year, we will see this extend to a new enhanced digital fact find and digital signatures. Then we'll see this progress to interactive tools between the advisor and the client to support the advisor in further demonstrating the value of their advice and building long-standing client relationships. Now, lastly, I think it's worthwhile noting, there we go, sorry, slides. Worthwhile noting where Advisor Logic and our solutions sit in the overall ecosystem. So, at the beginning, Rick discussed our offering of integrated solutions. And the focus that I've just spoken about is really on Advisor Logic and solving some of the challenges when advising on managed accounts. But more broadly, what you see on the screen here is the solutions for advisors. Now, they're already either inbuilt into Advisor Logic, or we can leverage Morningstar APIs and Zapier integrations that connect to over 3,000 third-party applications to be able to enhance that experience. This enables advisors to take advantage of third-party applications to complement Advisor Logic and Morningstar solutions, while also retaining a single source of truth across their business. And so I think that overall wraps up a few of the key benefits of Advisor Logic, our broader Morningstar solutions relating to managed accounts, and exciting initiatives we have in store for 2022. I think I'll hand back over to Brett now, but thank you everybody for your time, and I think we'll jump into our Q&A from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanie and Rick. That was very informative. I really liked how you talked about the importance of advice production efficiency, both from a time and a cost perspective. So thank you for that presentation. A few questions. The first one I'd like to ask you about is, does your advisor reporting modeling capability include MDA capability from a portfolio perspective?
Is that for Rick or?
Yeah, I'll go for you, for Lanie. Ideal.
Yeah, so certainly, I touched on data feeds, and a really big part of this, it's like any technology, you have to have quality data coming in to have that output. So certainly, a lot of our data feeds incorporate SMAs, and I believe we do incorporate some MDAs as well. But I think overall it does depend on the provider, if I'd be completely honest. And certainly we're working with a lot more providers to be able to extend this out, because it's not only the data that's coming in, but also the opportunity in terms of that straight through processing element to be able to actually streamline that process as well.
Of course, makes sense. Obviously, we've seen this proliferation of managed accounts, and no doubt there's been a significant upward spike in the last few years. But what do you consider the biggest impediments to increased usage?
I'll probably take that one, Lanie. Look, I think it goes to probably the 6 questions I asked at the beginning. It's a scale question more than anything. There's 2 parts to this. One of them is the delivery of efficient financial advice in any scenario, and how to basically contextualize a client's objectives and risk profile and preferences into a situation where they can have a outcome which is delivered via a managed account solution. The managed accounts themselves are still in some way still working out the data that they're actually allowing to be delivered into people like us. So this sort of touches on the previous question as well. So we're taking it upon ourselves to map out what we believe are important data elements, and we're obviously engaged with providers. But it's incredibly important that the overall industry talks more collectively around the exchange of information and how the underlying portfolios are constructed, what are the underlying constituents, so that people like ourselves and in fact anybody on the reporting side can build reporting as well as review capabilities for advisors. So yeah, that would be number one. Number two, I think ultimately it's actually the choice that's becoming challenging. So on reflecting upon some of the platform offerings that are actually out there, it's being more and more challenging to differentiate offerings. And I think new providers really need to think about what marketplace they're actually accessing and what type of investor they're really looking to attract.
Thank you. Got a question from the audience, which I'd just like to put to you. Does the digital fact find automatically feed into other tools such as cash flow, super, and insurance research? And does the digital fact find also include a digital insurance needs analysis that can be used as part of the client engagement piece?
Great question. So probably to highlight, like right now we have obviously a fact find available in Advisor Logic, and we also have fact find access to clients, for the advisor, for the end client. With that, it's certainly, it's a short form fact find. At this stage, we don't have the insurance needs analysis as part of that, but I think, what we're doing is we're working with various advisor groups, looking at doing roundtables, etc., to then be able to say, okay, well, we've put out the framework. What do they see as the most value as part of this offering? So we can really then get that feedback, beta test, and go from there. And sorry, what was that? The second point for that, Brett?
It was, bear with me for a moment. It was about, does the digital fact find also include a digital insurance needs analysis that can be used as part of the client engagement piece? So I think in the direct-to-client setting.
Yeah, so the digital fact find is not incorporating the needs analysis at this point in time. No, we're not looking at that. But as we explore some of the interactive tools, though, certainly that will be part of the list. And retirement planning, we've got various other tools in terms of Morningstar capabilities that we're looking at leveraging. We've got a new retirement tool as part of our investment management team as well. So yeah, over the course of the coming year, we're looking at leveraging as much of that as possible. And again, parts of that will be based on our group feedback and client feedback.
Thank you. Probably time for one final question. And obviously, this is a forum that is very much focused on practitioners in managed account space. How have you been thinking about managed accounts in the context of an advisor's workflow?
Yeah, so again, another good question in that I think we've touched on some of this through the presentation, really, in how it relates to each of the advice elements. Overall, the end-to-end advice process is really quite complex. I don't think anybody can deny that. So, we really need to look at the start of it in terms of that data element. How do we get the data into the solution to start with in an efficient and also quality data? a big part of that is data feeds. And again, touching on that, we really want to work with providers to be able to extend out the data feed capability. So the end result is then the advisors have got a lot more transparency over their client reporting, ease of use throughout the system, because the data does flow from the fact find through to the cash flow modeling, through to the research tools, through to the other areas. The fact find is that central hub. So, the more that we can uplift that quality and efficiency of that data, I think is kind of really one of the big ones. The second part of that is, the overall software itself, how that functions, the usability, the whole overall experience, not only from an end user perspective, but that experience between the advisor and the client. And that's where kind of that interactive engagement comes in. And, as I said, that's going to be a really big focus for us next year.
Yeah, from a strategic perspective, Brett, we are looking at it from the point of view, if you're thinking about the overall the overall advice process. Each of the component pieces has certain sub-processes within them, and how we address each one of those is going to be an offering that we would bring to the table, whether in existence or in development.
Thank you. That was an excellent session. I can certainly see why AdvisorLogic is the fastest growing product in its segment today. So thank you very much. In just a moment's time, I'm going to hand over to Peter Warne. Peter is the Managing Director and founder of Finura Group. And we've just heard from Morningstar AdvisorLogic about their platform. And obviously it's quite formidable, but we're also starting to see the emergence of broader ecosystems. And that gives great choice to practitioners in this space. So without further ado, I'd like to now hand over to Peter from Finura.
Thanks very much, Brett. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to our friends in Perth. So as Brett said, we're going to explore in the 20 odd minutes we've got together some of the emerging themes that we're seeing in the market around technology ecosystems. And it's kind of interesting backing on from the session we just had, in that you've got really clear evidence of really well capitalized providers in sort of wealth management, really unlocking all this capability in the tool set they've got. And obviously that's going to serve certain needs of the market really, really well. But in some of the work Finura does, we're seeing other needs potentially not being addressed, and we do believe there's some broader technology choices ahead for advisors in the future. A lot of the work Finura Group does is obviously with boutiques, licensees, and we do work obviously with product manufacturers and the software companies themselves to sort of help make better decisions around how this technology landscape is going to play out. I think I presented this session. I'm just going to share my screen now. I presented this session about a year ago. And I thought it'd be good just to maybe I just sort of cast my mind back a little bit to the things I was talking about. The thing that sort of captured people's interest last year I was talking about was this convergence that's happening between advice software, managed accounts, and platform custodial execution. And you've got a situation still in the market where you've got platforms very much starting to look at, well, how can they provide a deeper level of service and support to advisors in terms of the software they're using? And they're obviously, some of them are very well capitalized to do that. Some of the software companies are now thinking about, well, how do we provide better integration and execution support, or indeed become platforms in ourselves? And you've also got this enormous ecosystem of fintech providers, arguably maybe more than we need, who are trying to each build what they consider best-in-class solutions to suit certain jobs to be done from advice practices. And really, that trend has just accelerated in the last 12 months. We've seen quite a lot of M&A across the industry, and that's not unique to wealth management, but we've seen it in our space. So both internationally, but also here in Australia, we've seen platforms very active with M&A. We've seen software companies really active with M&A, and in fact, we've seen licensees really active with M&A. And everyone's on this journey, I guess, to understand, carve out, their niche in the market, to provide really good quality services to the customers they have. But everyone's, I guess, trying to jostle for position a little bit in this space. And the thing we're really interested in is just to work out, well, what are those, those right things going to be for the future? What do advisors actually really need? And how do we ultimately procure the right technology solutions to solve all the issues that are well understood. In terms of the actual sort of some key themes to talk about today, I do think we're seeing an emerging, shift to cloud-based technologies happening. It's happening in other verticals, and it's starting to really happen in wealth management. I'm going to mention a few companies specifically today that are well known to you, who are increasingly looking at financial services and by default wealth management around how they can provide better support, better services, and effectively a better ecosystem to build technology on. There are some uncomfortable truths with particularly our sector in Australia. I do want to talk about the addressable market. A lot of advisors, licensees talk to us and they express an element of frustration, perhaps, that maybe some of the technology we use in our industry hasn't progressed as well or as far as maybe some other sectors. I would reiterate the point that our market, as in financial advisors, holistic financial advisors in Australia, is relatively small compared to other verticals that you might be building software for. And those numbers are shrinking as well documented in the industry. On the right there, I've actually got two charts. I think in the industry, we talk a lot about authorized reps. We should be talking about holistic authorized reps, because that bottom line, the blue line there, is actually the numbers of advisors providing, a holistic level of financial advice, who I would consider to be the addressable market for software that the sort of presenters, that you've been hearing from today. Even just in our industry, you look at a company like Iris that has dominated for so long, and with approximately 80% market share in financial planning tools, their revenue from Xplan that they get is still dwarfed by other very successful SaaS businesses. And I think Xero was the most logical example where I've compared their revenue in Australia versus each other. So that does give you a sense, really, that we're probably going to see investment and players coming from outside the traditional areas because there's just not enough advisors to sell software to at the moment, which is why we're seeing other providers enter the space. I think it's how we pay for technology is really interesting at the moment. So there's two levels of advice technology. Obviously, there's things that you do within your practice to run your business and produce advice. And then there's obviously technology you use to execute advice and manage your client relationships through platforms. And the traditional model really has been that you pay for the software yourself and the client pays for the platform. And somewhere in the middle, your advisors and clients are getting different benefits from how those services are provided. I think we're going to see some pressure on that model, in the sense that we've got less advisors paying for software, more clients and bigger balances paying for platforms, but increasingly pressure on margins from platform businesses, which is obvious as well. Balance sheets within licensees are just not there. And obviously, so that investment in technology is not necessarily where we want to be. Advisor numbers are dropping, compliance costs are going up. But what's amazing is that we still have this huge demand for advice. A lot of businesses we talk to have waiting lists of clients who want to talk to them, and other models. So we're going to see increased capital coming into the space, investing in technology solutions maybe that don't exist today to address that. But ultimately, who's paying for all this? It's going to be the end client in some form. So it is not surprising to us that we are seeing a lot of sort of commentary from platforms, fund managers, insurance companies now as well, talking about building different types of advice technology to drive more scale in our industry. I think, where is the future heading? We look at other geographies a lot to sort of give us some leading indicators as to where things are happening. And Australia is still, in some ways, a centralized technology marketplace. We sort of have a world where advice firms will typically have a single relationship with a device technology provider, be it any of the majors. They'll use 2 or 3 different platforms, but ultimately a lot of the client data will sit in one space. Where that's been a challenge for licensees is where they're trying to support multiple technology providers. That becomes really complex. And the other challenge has been for advice firms that have differentiated their business. They've sort of changed their business models, where they're becoming accounting-led financial planning businesses, or they're offering more bespoke private wealth type services or various other markets people operate in, is sometimes those technology solutions just don't suit, particularly from a CRM perspective, exactly what they're looking for. When firms come and talk to us about changing CRMs, we tend to find that the key reason they're changing CRM is usually to do with the actual CRM functionality itself, not necessarily the advice or the tools or the research tools they're using. It's because that CRM they have potentially outgrown that CRM and are looking for something a little bit more broad in terms of what it does. Obviously, the problem with that is those tools are not built for financial planning, which again creates a challenge. I think we're going to see increasingly businesses look towards a decentralized model of technology. And what I mean by decentralized is that it will be less likely that people will have a monogamous relationship with one software company or one platform. And increasingly, firms we're hearing from are looking to build their own data warehouses and create their own data models to suit their own purposes and procure technology to suit those various things. That hasn't happened today. Traditionally speaking, the major software companies have sort of held on to that data, and you've sort of had to integrate with them or work with them to do that. What we see in the US particularly is large boutique wealth firms now building their own data warehouses and actually procuring those own technologies themselves. That is a IFA or RIA in America controlled marketplace, and it has big implications, I think, for how technology is used and built in the future. Ultimately, there will be a choice, and there's downsides and upsides with all choices with tech, but you will have options to have a very monogamous relationship with a software provider and potentially a platform as well, ignoring best interests and all those other things. Or you'll be, particularly for larger, more complex businesses with different needs, you'll probably be entering a slightly different model for how you actually implement technology. The really cool thing, and I think the thing people are crying out for, and it was mentioned in the previous presentation, was we just need a better way to share data in the industry. We don't do it well. Data's poorly managed, and a lot of this interesting technology people are trying to work with ultimately falls down because we haven't invested enough in data structures and sharing of data protocols, and that is going to change significantly. So what's going on more broadly? I'm not going to talk about specific players, but I think it's just interesting to hear some things about businesses we talk to. So increasingly larger firms that are multidisciplinary are looking to other types of CRM solutions, but perhaps outside the traditional financial planning space. Logically, they're looking at things like Salesforce, they're looking at Microsoft, they're looking at some cases Zoho and HubSpot and all these other sort of, let's call them large global CRM providers. And really, reason being is because they're great CRMs. They provide a lot of flexibility. They're effectively productivity tools in their own right. The challenge is that we don't necessarily have the right ecosystem of tools to sit around it to enable financial planning. Ultimately, though, where these larger businesses have an advantage is they have obviously huge amounts of capital to invest. And if they want to target this area, they can really do it in a major way and potentially provide services at a much lower cost level than perhaps some of the more industry-specific CRMs will provide. I'm certainly not advocating that people are going to stop using those tools there on the left. I think you do need specific financial planning tools to run your business, but potentially how you store data, how you manage customer information from a CRM perspective, and potentially how you run your business will potentially change as those tools enter into our ecosystem in a far more meaningful way. One practical example is Microsoft. Microsoft is effectively on, our research says 98% of all desktops in advice businesses in Australia. Most people are using, in fact, often say that behind Xplan, the number 2 financial planning tool is Excel and Word. Most SOAs are produced on Word still today. And I think for any of us that have used these systems through the pandemic, we've seen noticeable improvements in how these tools all sort of connect together. A great example is that Microsoft, for example, see that Teams is probably going to be their major productivity tool moving forward. They envisage people spending more time on Teams than they do on Outlook. Even just if anyone that's tried to present things on PowerPoint. Doing it on Teams is such an easier experience. And they've got all this interesting capability they're building, which are on this slide here, around how all those applications share data within each other. The reality is that most businesses are using these tools already. You already have a relationship with Microsoft, and I think you'll find more and more of the workflow type things you've been looking to do in your practice that may have been challenging to do may sit potentially more in a Microsoft ecosystem that does in a specific financial planning tool that you may be using as well. Microsoft in November released their financial services cloud version of their product, which is basically designed to target banks and wealth managers and how they sort of service this space. I think you're going to find potentially all sorts of interesting new businesses or applications that come out of that move from Microsoft. You have to be living under a rock to not sort of understand that those global technology companies, when they make a decision to enter a space, they can come in there really, really quickly. There's some really good benefits to all of this. I mean, just in terms of market power. So Microsoft, Google, Amazon, in the last 12 months, those businesses have added $1.2 trillion in market capitalization just through their share price growth. These three businesses, particularly, that is their combined annual R&D spend versus the entire, every single company on the listed, that's listed or private in Australia combined. So when you talk about how we're getting innovation, how we're getting more interesting technologies to improve how our businesses run and how we provide services to our clients, it's likely potentially going to come underpinned by those three providers as well, albeit there'll be probably someone sitting on the top configuring it and doing it the way that you want to do it. That is why fundamentally we believe that that these guys are going to make an impact on how our industry operates. When we're putting together technology stacks for businesses, and a lot of firms are thinking about this for the future, there's a couple of key areas that people are thinking about. So the feedback we get, particularly from larger businesses, is, we want to select best-in-class tools to deliver the model that we're delivering. And ultimately, that's going to come with a lot of very challenging decisions, because you're going to have to ensure that this tool connect really well together. There'll be a lot of complexity in procuring all these different vendors, but ultimately the technology is going to be there, particularly if you've built, as you see down the bottom there, you've got the right data connectors and you've got the right approach to data built on obviously one of those stacks, either Microsoft, Amazon or Google. All of that opportunity is open to you as well. These are enormously disruptive influences that may have been out of reach for smaller businesses a decade ago. Right here now, those things are coming your way, and you'll have opportunities to build those technologies yourself. It's going to change the skill sets in our business for sure. I think we have a whole ecosystem of people in our industry that are using, who are trained to use certain tools in certain ways. Potentially believe that the way we develop advice in the future will change a lot. The people we have in our practice will change a lot. Already talking to businesses about how do they recruit good people. We just don't have enough good people in our industry. Ultimately, you will be recruiting people in your practice that are really good with data, really good with client experience, because ultimately you're going to have all the software tools there you need to do it. What you've got to be great at is pulling it all together and making it usable and realistic. So, if I was thinking about my future roadmap for staff and what kind of people I want to be hiring, I'd probably be less focused on administration staff and traditional paraplanners. I'd be thinking about how do I recruit people in that have got really great experience with data, would be my number one thing. And the great thing is we have a university system and education system that's going to be pumping out a lot of graduates who are great in this space. This is a number one employment area. Our industry has to recruit more people from this space because we have a real talent shortage ahead of us. I just want to really nail four last points for this topic today. A lot of advice tools that have been built in the industry have been innovative and they've been built to create a need. But ultimately, these tools have been built on some custom technology, and anyone that's built software in this space will tell you it's slow. People take time to adopt things, and the pace of innovation hasn't been there, nor has the market size or the appetite for these tools actually been there. What's awesome, in our opinion, is that the ecosystems, and this is sort of why we're an advocate for ecosystems, the ecosystems that have been offered by Microsoft, Google, to a lesser extent, Amazon, they're giving people the ability to build their own custom applications in a much more cost-effective way, with better data security, better better UI. All those things are sort of natively built into these products, and you're going to hear a lot more about low code development opportunities happening in the industry, which obviously presents a challenge for people on older technology because they've got to keep up. I fundamentally think advice firms are going to be faced with some real decisions in the future, and by and large in our industry, most of the technology decisions have been made by, en masse, the banks and the large sort of licensees. That's completely changed now because of the way our industry has flipped itself, and we've got a really fragmented industry at this point. Ultimately, businesses are going to be faced with increased, competition for technology choices, and as you're hearing this week and you've been hearing all year, all these providers, platforms, software companies, and others are coming to you with all these new cool bits of tech. The decisions you make are really, really important from this point on, because in many ways that technology approach that you use in your business will be a bit of a differentiator to your operating model. And for anyone that's experimented with technology or tried some different things that hasn't gone well, you kind of understand the challenges if you make the wrong call. And obviously that was one of the reasons why we started the company that we have today. Why are these cloud companies really important? Again, just to highlight the many trillions of dollars that sit on their balance sheets. They absolutely are going to be investing huge amounts of money. These cloud technologies are going to benefit the current software companies you work with. So many of the people they're presenting this week probably build stuff on these clouds already. But ultimately, what's going to be really important is you're going to see, particularly, we believe, Microsoft, Salesforce, Google, providing lots more education resources and insight directly to the IFA market, because they understand that this is a market that has a huge amount of appetite for technology innovation. One final point on data. It wouldn't be a consultant presentation without a bit of a buzzword, but you will be hearing a lot more about a concept called the Dataverse from Microsoft in particular. There's a changing thinking how we manage data in our industry. The old world was very much around centralizing data, and that works pretty well, but you've got to make sure that it's structured and cleansed correctly. What we're hearing a lot more from, particularly from the cloud companies, is that you're never going to get away from data sitting in many systems. Clients are going to be permissioning to share data with you. Organizations have to get better at sharing data. So ultimately, a lot of the work that particularly Microsoft and Amazon are doing is working out how to permission and share data in a more effective way, effectively rendering some of the CRM functions irrelevant because the way data connects itself. I think that's the most interesting trend for the next 3 or 4 years. Everything that tends to go off the rails in our industry from a technology perspective usually stems from a data issue. And the companies that are really going to win, and where I think there should be more focus from our industry on, is investing in businesses that are helping solve data cleansing for our sector, because a $2 trillion retirement savings pools tells me that with not enough advisors, we've got to get a hell of a lot better about how we use consumer data to deliver advice. So on that note, I'm going to stick to my time, and thank you for that session, and I'll hand to Brett for some questions.
Thank you, Peter. That was really interesting. One of the, I guess, great challenges in this industry is that the production time for advice has been more than 6 hours for every piece of advice produced. Yep. And this might be the game change that the industry is crying out for, to really do something quite significant in that space. We've got a lot of questions from the audience, and I appreciate we've only got a limited amount of time. So we'll try and get through as many of these as we can. The first one is, how do you see the likes of Microsoft or Salesforce answering the needs of a CRM being able to integrate modeling tools directly?
So that's fairly straightforward. I think a lot of it will come down to demand from advisors. That's first of all. So the reality is that a lot of the modeling tools available in the industry have either some level of API or, sorry, let me just stop my screen share here. How do I do that? Sorry. Okay, we've done that now. Sorry. Yeah. Some level of API connectivity at the moment. And there are different levels of maturity at this stage. Our view is that all of the modeling tools and research tools in the industry will need to operate on true open APIs and give advisors the permissioning to integrate them with whatever CRM they're using. And I think they'll be table stakes. I think if your research tools don't do that, you'll be left out.
As someone who's worked in software space and advice for a long time, one of the challenges is always cost of delivering technology at an affordable price. What do you think are the implications of the likes of the big end of town being able to make their technology accessible from a cost perspective?
Look, it's quite interesting. The businesses we talk to, most advice businesses are still operating on reasonably good margins, but they'd love to serve more customers in a really efficient way. I think the reality is, the hope is that better technology actually in the advice businesses, the automating processes will solve potentially the human capital component. So practical example, most businesses we spoke to last year, we did some surveys. A lot of businesses on average spent over 150 hours last year on fee consent and all the different platforms. Businesses taking 6 hours to produce manual spreadsheets because their advice CRM doesn't do what it needs to do. I think there's a whole lot of opportunity that these cloud technologies are going to provide people to automate those processes. The thing we need is capability within the advice practices or support to help implement those tools. And we also need a willingness from within businesses to embrace this technology and not realize it's not a threat to your job. It's just providing a more scalable model. I'm yet to come across an advice practice, though, ignoring all the compliance issues, that have really been able to crack that nut of 100 to 150 clients per advisor holistically. The real test for me is, can an advice business double that number and maintain its margins and without spending huge amounts more on technology? What I would say is it's more likely those large cloud technologies will be able to provide those services at a lower cost than potentially some of the incumbents.
By virtue of scale.
Correct.
You talked a little bit about data today, and we all say in this industry, data is the new oil. And I think it's probably one of the most underutilized resources in advice businesses today. How do you think the emergence of new technologies is going to change that?
It's more in how data is shared and cleansed. I think I touched on that before. So, we don't have very many providers of data cleansing services in our industry at the moment. There's a couple that are out there. But the reality is that a lot of the heavy work that goes on with data management in our industry is usually, transforming it from some other system that's sat in historically. I believe that the quick wins are collecting client data can be done a hell of a lot more efficiently. I think all the advice software systems are doing a really good job of trying to improve that, as are the client portals. But ultimately, the challenge that we haven't quite solved is that a lot of advice businesses have grown on the back of M&A, where multiple businesses are sort of coming together, and we haven't necessarily nailed the whole data structure model that's optimal for an advice business moving forward without a huge exercise in cleansing it. So it's a really tough one to answer, Brett, but I would suspect that you're going to see more and more businesses pop up in the next 18 to 24 months that specialize in data management and cleansing services for advice firms and licensees. And that, honestly, if I was looking to start a new business tomorrow, that's probably what I'd do.
Sure. Just very quickly, I'm conscious of time. You mentioned we've seen a huge growth in new technology available, advice tech. Technology is never complete, it's never done. Where do you think are the greatest gaps at the moment?
I still think advice generation. I still think managing advice documentation across the industry is still really clunky and very disparate. So it's the reason why it's hard to build software for this industry is that you got 20,000 practices doing things 20,000 different ways in our industry. So we've kind of got to come together as an industry and just kind of agree on perhaps some structural issues. And the thing that gives me hope is most advice firms you talk to now openly acknowledge that their SOA is not the differentiator. They're probably quite happy for a more standard model where possible. But I think from a time perspective, if we could just knock off 4 hours of post-merge editing that happens in Microsoft Word from Paraplanner's times, I think that would unlock a lot of capability. The other big one that I think is underserved is client engagement portals, how we present data to clients. I still think a lot of data is manually put together for a client when they come in for a review, and we don't really have a way of instantly providing a client a snapshot in a real way of one data. And even the firms we talk to, they often second guess the data. They'll look at the CRM, then they'll ring the platform, and there's a lot of time that goes into producing client reporting. So I think we're going to see, if we get the whole data management piece right between how we share investment data and client data and provide more investment into really good client portals, kind of cool to hear some of the stuff Morningstar are working on. I think that'll be a huge time saver because clients want information when they want it. They don't want to wait for a review.
Very good. Really appreciate your perspectives. Very interesting and very insightful. Just before we sign off today, what I'd like to do is just highlight what's coming up tomorrow. Hopefully you've been enjoying the week so far. 2 really good sessions coming up tomorrow. The first one is by SS&C. They're going to talk about TAMPs, turnkey asset management, and the experience that they found in North America and its applicability to Australia. And that'll be followed by Stuart Holdsworth from Financial Simplicity, who's going to talk about how investing is evolving and being able to deliver personalized portfolios at scale. So 2 really interesting topics that both relate very closely to managed accounts. I'd just like to sign off by thanking everyone for joining us today. And thank you for the team from Morningstar, Lanie and Rick and Peter. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.